introduce you to yourself. This is the Seeking Selfdom Going Deeper podcast, and I'm your host, Akello Stone.
Got 3 great questions today from the wonderful Cole Murray, and I would like to begin with the question.
When something weighs heavily on my mind, I have a really difficult time not thinking about it. What thought reframing steps are helpful to successfully take a vow, vacation off worry?
Taking a vacation off worry. I don't normally use acronyms. There's a lot of acronyms out there, right? But VOW, vacation off worry. I almost feel like I have had to work diligently at not worrying. You know, a lot of times people talk about present-mindedness. And as much as we think we're present, we're in the present, there is a great deal of time for most of us. Again, some people are very actualized on that, right? But there seems to be this idea that if we worry about something that has not happened, we can prevent it from happening. Or we can actually experience the negative emotions of something that has not happened. And that's kind of blows my mind. I first came to terms with the idea that I was doing that myself. I read this book called Playing the Quantum Field. And there was this concept called, I believe it was called mind tripping. And it's about going all the way to something that's never happened, which is still, very much an abstract thing if it hasn't happened. And then feeling the emotions and feeling the angst and the worry about it. And then it begins to affect your present life, and it begins to affect your present emotions and your relationships just from that worry. So, it's going to be there. There's this idea that, present-mindedness is important to live that way. But we're adults, and we also kind of have to think a little bit in the future, right? I think that we would run the risk if we're only present and not thinking about the next step. I think we got to spend some time doing that. But we can do it in a kind of a planning and strategic way. If something is causing you worry, instead of really getting to the heart of that worry, tell yourself, and again, when I say take a vacation off worry, and I actually did this. I actually took a week where I just did not worry about things that have not happened. I just focused on what I'm doing right now. What can I do now? What can I do better? How can I make something more meaningful? And how can I, really enjoy the experience now? Because I have found that worry will destroy the good times that you're trying to have. So take a strategic approach where you said, I'm going to table that, kind of like how you put something comes in your inbox, you're not going to be able to deal with it. Maybe you put a little flag on it. It's going to be there, but you're not worrying about it because you're doing these other things and you're going through these other things. So put it on the back burner, whatever you want to call it. Even if it's just 3 days. When you find yourself worrying about something that did not happen, stop yourself and say, I'm taking a vacation. The whole idea is funny. The whole idea of a vacation really is to get away. And if you cannot get away physically, you cannot go to another place, you can make an adjustment and you can shift your mind. But it takes awareness and it takes your ability. It's almost kind of like, I love sweets. I'm a sweet tooth guy, but I know I'm middle aged. I can't roll like that anymore. So instead of, if a cake is presented to me, I just say, I'm good. I'm just saying I'm good. I make that decision immediately right there. I don't think about it, and hopefully no one's pushing me on this cake. And that's kind of how you have to do it. It's not some magical formula. It's pretty much listening to yourself and responding and being able to control and make those decisions that are the best ones for you. And if worrying is causing you grief and angst and a lot of negative emotions, then that's like the cake that you don't need, right? Say no to it. And you'll find that, and I always find this, I always say when we go to sleep at night, when they say sleep on it, the mind will start to work things out in a way on the subconscious level that we can't do during the day. So if anything, don't worry about it. When you go to sleep, let your mind chew through it in the subconscious level. And then over your time, you'll find that your worry was probably inflated, and you'll find it will begin to dissipate. So don't worry about something unless it's right there in your face. And instead of worrying about it, think about problem solving. Because worry is really, to me, this idea I have no control. It's almost like, I'll be honest with you, I misplaced my keys the other day, and I haven't done that in years. And I've been around, the yard and the house, took the trash out. I thought I threw it out in the trash. And I said, okay, don't trip. It's only keys. Get the keys replaced. You have an extra set. Get those duplicated. Stop worrying about it. It's keys. It's done. But at first, and I felt good after I did that. But at first, my knee-jerk reflex was, my whole world is falling apart. I have no control over everything. I'm going to lose I'm going to lose it all. Everything's just going to collapse. And I was like, wow, where did that come from? So that strategy has been very helpful to me, and I hope it can be helpful to you. Let's see what the next question is.
Which two rituals made the most dramatic difference in your process of seeking selfdom? They can be something you added or removed from your life.
Wow. Okay, so what I added was conversations with myself in my head about things that I felt were preventing me from actualizing my full potential. I know that's a big statement, right? But if we look inside of our minds and the conversations that we have, and a lot of times I would hear voices, and not like, I wouldn't hear voices, but I would hear voices of the past, echoes of the past, things that have been said to me, as opposed to things that I said, just things that have been said to me 20, 30, 40 years after they've been said. They would come up in my mind at certain points in time. And up to that point, I would just ignore them. They would eventually dissipate and go away, but they would come back again. And then I had to say to myself, again, you have to confront what's happening, this monologue, and you have to start to retaliate, if you will. So I started to respond to those things that were said to me that were particularly mentally and emotionally destructive. It's the shadow voice. I talk about it in the book, the shadow voice and the savior voice. So I would be the savior voice, and the shadow voice would be the voice telling me what I cannot do. A lot of times it could be an aggregation of everything that's been told to you and everything's been done to you, and people that have done you wrong, and people that have hurt you. And we all have all that. We do. But most of us will not let that go. We put it way in the back of our minds, and we have a moment of, our moods will fluctuate. They will go up, they'll go down. Sometimes we have a positive, high energy day. Sometimes we have a low energy day. When we have the low energy day, that seems to be when a lot of that negative self-talk comes up. So first strategy is add a dialogue approach to that as opposed to just a monologue. Talk back, decry that, rebuke that, if you will. So that would be adding something. Now, taking away would be removing, and then this is again an ongoing thing. I'm not there. I'm working at it every day. But trying to take away the expectations that I feel I should have for myself based upon what is deemed successful or appropriate, and replacing that with who I am and what I want to do and what my aim is. And maybe I don't have a strategy yet to do it, or maybe I have bits and pieces of the strategy, but I would rather get going and moving towards something that I really want, that's really meaningful to me, rather than deal with the drudgery of something that I don't feel emotionally connected to. Because I believe that selfdom is not just about who you are, but it's also what you think about, what you do. It's an active thing. It's a passive thing. The selfdom is this, we're this ever-changing being. And, each new day, each new week, each new month, things change. We add experiences, we add new information, we revise the information that we had. So those are two strategies that are not kind of written down. These are kind of the things that I found that have worked. I mean, there's so many things that you can do with your mind. Every time someone says they're bored, I just feel like boredom is the wrong word, because there's this whole universe in your mind and the way that you can reconfigure things and refine. You can refine yourself over time. People always want to redefine. I think you can just refine. I think you have a great core. You're like a piece of clay, and you can't just leave it as a lump there. And if you shaped it into something, you can easily shape it into something else. I think that's why I like Play-Doh. It's like, okay, there's a dinosaur. And then I always like, let me do the snake. I always like to go for the snake. I kind of like the rolling thing. But I can turn the dinosaur into a snake, into a rabbit. I can make it into a pancake. We can do that with our minds and what we think about ourselves, and just kind of be playful with it. It doesn't have to be this heavy, heavy psychological enacting, heavy psychological activity, if you will. It doesn't have to be that. It can be that, and it might be that sometimes, but it can also be playful and fun. Sometimes I wonder, especially right now, during COVID, I'm like, what is really missing? And people are really missing in my life. But also, if they're missing, then what can I do at this time right now to refine myself so that, I come out better. It's like a mental boot camp. Think of COVID lockdown as like a mental boot camp. What things can you do? What new directions can you take while you're there? Everyone else is on pause. It's like a remote. As soon as everything's better, just hit play. And yeah, things are going to change. Relationships are going to change as a result.
The word failure is a trigger for a lot of people. What can we do to help separate the feeling of being a failure from failing at a task?
I talked about this in my book. I don't use the word failure. I find failure to be a really self-depreciating word. I mean, things don't work out. It just didn't work out. It didn't happen the way that I wanted it to. My skills were not developed enough to get the end result that I wanted. These are all phrases that you can use instead of failure. Because when I think of failure, I think of like school, and you failed, and you failed to do this. And the word fail, it just goes deeper than that action that you were not successful at in the determination of what's successful. We don't look at the actual attempts, the actual actions that we undertake to do something and get something done. And so when you hear the word failure, you feel like you've wasted your time, and it was complete and utter disappointment for you, for everybody, for the world. And and then we allow that word and that concept to trickle over into every aspect of our life. So we fail at one thing, and it must be terrible at this, and worse and worse. And we go through this process of evaluation that's harmful because of that word. So we want to rephrase that word, and we want to look at everything that we do is not going to turn out exactly the way that we wanted it to turn out. For example, there's again, back to the baking shows, right? There's one called Nailed It, which is kind of based on this idea I think was a lot of fun, where someone had make this elaborate cake, could be like the Easter Bunny, and he's got a basket. And then someone would try to create that at home, and it would look like some kind of like alien that had been stepped on and just looked a hot mess. And it would just say, nailed it, nailed it. It's like, I know that rabbit does not look like the rabbit that I saw on Pinterest, the whole idea we want to replicate and we want to create something that someone else has done. Even though the person that did the bunny with the basket has probably been baking for like 15, 20 years, and you're going to go in the kitchen. Of course you're not going to be able to reach that level of mastery, but I think we can laugh at our failures. Sometimes the failures involve money, and that's a hard pill to swallow. I understand. But what did you learn as a result of getting to the point where you've determined that you failed? It couldn't be nothing's a complete failure. Every attempt that you do is something more than you did before not doing it. So failure, redefine that word, remove that word from your mind, remove that word as something to describe things that happen. Rejection. I have been in the commercial acting, on camera hosting. I've been doing that for, 12, 13 years. I go through a lot of auditions. Of course, things have changed now, but I have gone through a lot of auditions. And at first, I would be very obsessed with, I'm going to get it. I always go in there thinking that I got, never walk away saying like I blew it. I always assume that I did my best and they're, going to really want me. And then when you never get a call again and again and again and again, you could go into this mental state that says, I'm a complete failure. But what I did was, this is how I turned it around, is go in, do my best, I'm prepared, I'm me, 100% me, right? I'm doing my thing. And after I leave, I let it just dissolve and forget about it. I think about the process, what it felt like being in the room, finding my mark, who's there looking at me, behind the table. But then after I left, it's like I carried on with my day. I'm like, where's the next opportunity? What about this? What about that? So by letting go of this huge expectation that was completely out of my control, because a lot of failures is a result of things that were out of your control, not within your control. So you have to just move on. That's just like what life is about, in improv. Improv is I talked a little bit about improv in my book because there's a lot that you can learn about yourself. A lot of times we see improv and taking classes as everybody wants to be a performer. And I think for many people, improv allows us to take a chance and dare to fail, as they say, which basically means, you could just, completely blow it or blow a scene or, but there's still a supportive environment that allows that to happen. And when you're in a highly competitive environment where failure becomes problematic for you, could actually be detrimental to your involvement and participation. That's like extra stress, right? So you could fail every week, if you will, in improv, and still you're supported and you can still come back and no one's going to say, what are you doing here? That's a wonderful thing. So you can create that kind of mentality for yourself, is dare to fail and feel okay with it, and don't hold on to the negative emotions. Maybe you feel disappointed, it's all right, but let it go. Let that moment happen, however you experience it, but don't be attached to the emotions that might result. So that's all I have for you. 3 exceptionally interesting questions, and I hope you keep listening. This is episode 2 of Seeking Selfdom, Going Deeper. And I'm your host, Akello Stone.